All right, waiting on Craig to join us. If anyone's watching so far, I'm still getting updates from Streamlabs to see. But yeah, if you are watching, welcome. Feel free to ask any questions. Share what you're working on. Share what you'd like to work on. That's always fun too. And yeah, we'll get started in a moment. Let's see here. Oh, I see. Yeah. Craig just has a slight delay, having some technical issues. It's the start to a new year. It's to be expected. Let me add some fun messages too to everyone. Hello, chat. Welcome, everyone. Use the text chat to ask questions or share what you are working on. I'll relay the information to Craig. Get you answers, advice, feedback, and insights. That's what Craig is here for. Yeah. Greetings.
Hey,
How are you? All right, we're live already. I'm just letting chats know what's going on. We'll see what happens to welcome people on LinkedIn. I can see you now. Thank you for joining us. As I said in the text chat, use the text chat to ask any questions or share what you're working on or ideas that you'd like to pursue, and I'll relay all that information to Craig to get answers, insight, feedback, and advice. And yeah, that's what Craig is here for. Craig, how about you introduce yourself to everyone?
all right. Yeah, my name's Craig Silverstein. I've been in the tech world for a long time, started consulting with tech companies, went through an pretty solid acquisition with SyncSketch to Unity Technologies. If you're in the gaming industry, you've probably heard of Unity. And currently, I own my own tech-powered, I'd call it a consulting firm, but really it's a business intelligence company that helps organizations plan, whether it's market entry, scaling, going through a merger and acquisition. Um, and it really looks at how to create the biggest value pool and value offering for both you, your company, your clients, and the market. So it's an AI powered engine. I like to call everything a hybrid service with AI currently because really the person should be in the driver's seat, who really knows how to validate an investment thesis or a business thesis to really figure out how to get the best value to both you as the founders of a company or your employees. And that's actually another aspect that we're about to launch right now is employee value planning, where instead of ramping up over the course of a quarter or sometimes even 6 months for employees to start really impacting an organization, we want to collapse that down in terms of the information available to a new employee to about 90 minutes rather than several months. So that's what we're working on now. But lots of cool stuff. I mentor startups, advise a couple of companies, and just love to see people make their dreams come true for them and their clients.
I love it. That's why we become friends and why you've become a great mentor in the community. And yeah, just love when you join us for this and come out to the in-person events and everything. Yeah, it's kind of interesting how much AI is, in my opinion, infecting a lot of people's minds and doing a disservice to their ability to practice critical thinking and really, ask the hard questions and do the hard, dirty work involved with being an entrepreneur. And in some cases, with a career, the work in their field. Um, One of the things I do enjoy about what you do with your work is how hands-on you are. You leverage AI as a supplemental tool to help, create less busy work, but you're always going through it and making sure that, you're analyzing it using the most powerful, tool you have, your brain, and then helping people make wise decisions with the data available to everyone, yourself, their teams. It's kind of interesting, with two, uh, starting 2026 and the AI bubble and everything. I'm curious about your thoughts while we're waiting for some people to ask some questions. Ask questions. That's why we're here. Don't be shy. What are your feelings in terms of how much AI is being shoveled into new startup ventures in the hopes that it will be appealing to customers or, more importantly, investors?
Yeah, I mean, it's uh, I'd say one of the biggest things with companies right now, and I guess I'll start with kind of the downside of AI before getting into the upside, because I think the upside, there's a lot to talk about. The downside, some of the things a lot of people have heard about and others are starting to find out as they begin working closer, more hands-on with artificial intelligence and LLMs. But I think the biggest thing is that companies need to start with their problems and their situations and their context before just trying to guess what AI could be good at for them, because then they're trying to force themselves into using a tool, and you don't know if you're picking up a hammer to hit a nail or you're getting a screwdriver to hit a nail. And it's one of those things where you really want to align the right tools for the right purpose to accelerate the growth of your company or the value of your company. So one of the things, and there's a lot of kind of thought leaders in AI that say start with this. When you run into a situation that you're just exerting a lot of effort, time, or resources towards, look at, can how can AI help me with this, or can AI help me with this? And that's one of the things where you can discuss with yourself. You can do some tests with a typical regular LLM, hop onto Gemini or ChatGPT and say, hey, I am in this situation. This is my role in this situation. How, um, and I'd say even incorporate some context. Obviously, nothing if you work for a company. Don't insert stuff into regular LLMs where you don't really have a good standard contract with or anything, because they'll use your stuff. But I would say what you want to do is start asking AI itself, the LLM, how would you resolve this situation? Or do you see efficiencies that could be gained? Or what's the biggest value that you can offer into making this more effective or efficient? And see what it says and play with it. And you might get very bad answers. You might get some cool answers. But the thing is, you're using it as a tool for you so that you can determine what is the best direction to go. One of the big things that AI is very good at, is looking at, or I should say, accumulating data points. And you can validate them if it's getting much better at citing sources for different things. And that's one of the things my company does is every data point that we get, we want to validate somehow, at least the very strong important ones, so that companies can make powerful decisions fast. So that's one way to start working with it. Otherwise, if you don't see huge value for AI in solving a situation, it's just going to be an expensive mess. Don't do it. You don't have to use AI for everything, and you shouldn't use AI for everything. But there are use cases where it will accelerate your company and growth, and you have to find out which of those use cases is most powerful for you.
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of like the foundation for any piece of technology, right? It's a tool to automate systems. And too often, like you're kind of touching on, founders are trying to create a product or service to, in their mind, address a problem, provide a solution to that problem before they have designed a system that can run manually to provide those solutions to it, right? And
Hmm.
they then try to apply either, core technology to automate that or go that extra step and have AI do that. And it just creates a huge mess. And what we've been seeing with a lot of people, especially in the consumer spaces, that are getting AI attached to every product and service they have is pushback. Like, I don't want this. I never asked for this. This is horrible. And it's ruining the experience they're having. It makes the experience not enjoyable. It's less enjoyable. And thus, it's robbing them of the benefits and the value in that. But we've got some really cool questions coming in. So yeah, thank you everyone. We got some good stuff coming in over here on Twitch. So TQ Mid asks, "What's the single most important signal you look for when deciding if a SaaS idea has true 10x potential versus just being a feature or incremental improvement?" And I posted the information in the chat over here on Start Mod for you too, if you want to read it.
Yeah. So, I mean, 10x, I imagine you say that because that's really what investors are looking for. And a lot of founders, they kind of tie a multiple of 10 to what they're doing or solving. And that makes a lot of sense. But I would say more than that, really look at the data to figure out, can you even 10x something? And that's looking at what problem you're solving, who you're solving it for, and looking at kind of those basic, okay, what's your tam sam sum? That's total addressable market, your service obtainable market, and then well, service addressable market, then service obtainable market. So obtainable market is really what is going to tell you how fast you can make something back. A lot of investors and companies say, okay, what's your TAM? That's total addressable market. That's the entire market of something for people that don't even need to use your product or don't even want to use your product using it. And they get very held up on that number. And I think that's why a lot of companies don't 10x what they're doing, or they're surprised that they don't 10x something. It's because you're looking at the wrong number. Really, you want to look at the people that I really want to use this product, that would get the most value out of this product. That's really what you want to look at. And that's where you want to start. And I'd say once you figure out your service obtainable market, which also aligns with your company's actual state and context, that's actually what makes it a much smaller number than TAM, is you're looking at, okay, how many people can I even service right now in this particular industry or market at the state of my company? And then you can start modeling out, okay, if I added 10 employees that provide this service, or salespeople, it will increase capacity, different things. Then you can really start actual business planning. And that's what ties your vision or where you want to go with the company to the actual way to get there. So instead of just looking at how many people can I service, look at how do I actually get to this 10x multiple? What moves do I need to make in the first 30 days, next 60 days, next 90 days, next year, next 2 years, next 3 years to actually hit whatever multiple you want to get to during that time frame? And that's really, like, it seems like it's magic. These companies all of a sudden, whoa, they land with a 10x multiple and it happens overnight for their revenue. And that's not how it works. They develop plans and they know what they're doing or executing to get there. And it's not that a plan works out exactly as they anticipated. That never happens. Most plans are, you kind of see those little posts online, like what I expected and then reality, and there's a squiggly line all over the place. That's the way reality does work. So what you want to do is become adaptable to different things while not changing your goal, changing your execution strategy to get to your goal. A lot of companies drift away from their goals and they have trouble catching up. So they start moving their goal and saying, you know what, let's, instead of 10xing our multiple in 10 years, let's 5x it. Oh, we're far away from that. Let's 2.5x it. So they're changing their goal instead of changing their business strategy or methodology and execution strategy to get there. So that's really important to look at. And don't get discouraged when things don't happen to plan. Look at it, analyze it, and get feedback is the biggest asset a company can really leverage.
Yeah, you're touching on a lot of really important things and a lot of problem areas for founders as well when it comes to understanding the market and who their customers are. This is especially true with engineers who have the capacity to build anything they want in a lot of cases, and they rush to build this comprehensive, tool or website, app, piece of software, AI enabled thing, but they didn't take enough time or any time to go and talk to people and do the research. And my background's in experience design and research, and that's the heart of everything that you're doing. You need to understand how to provide people with an enjoyable experience with benefits and how to create value from that. And so when you're talking about, yeah, TAM, SAM, SOM, of course, you want to have a large enough total addressable market to hopefully scale into being like, a unicorn startup. But at, uh, at the in the moment to just get started and have any chance of that, you need to figure out that serviceable attainable market, the SOM, and how to penetrate that market and provide people with a product or service that, again, they're going to enjoy, they're going to benefit from, and see value in, enough value to give you money and repeatedly use it, and then tell everyone they know who's like them, who they know will benefit from it as well and enjoy it as well, to try it as well, right? And that's what product market fit is. You need to achieve that level of love, essentially, with your product or service and your brand within the people that you're selling to, and then you can start to figure out how you can scale and, you know achieve a understanding of who you're marketing to and how to provide them with better features, better benefits, a more enjoyable experience as you continue to iterate and then optimize. So it's really great that you touched on that and shared that. We got some really good questions coming in from, yeah, all over the place. This is a really good start to the new year. We've got YouTube, we got LinkedIn, we got Twitch. So yeah, I'm gonna jump over real quick to some questions over on YouTube, and then we'll get back to TQ Mid because they posted a lot of really cool questions over on Twitch. But let's see here. All right, so Corporate Brank 3437 over on YouTube asks, what are your thoughts on the impact of AI on competition in the SaaS sphere? It's not much easier to launch or copy someone else's idea. Okay, so real quick for everyone listening who may be new at this, SaaS means why is my brain going blank right now? It's essentially a software as a subscription service. So what that means is you're paying repeatedly on a monthly, annual basis, something in between, a service charge to continuously access that piece of software. I want to be really clear that SaaS can be applied to a piece of software in any market or any industry. When you're thinking about SaaS, all that really is describing is the business model you're using to monetize that piece of software. So before, when Adobe first was releasing Photoshop, for example, you would pay a licensing fee to essentially purchase that software and have access to it indefinitely. So I'd get, Adobe 95 and I'd spend $500 for a year and it was mine to use forever. Now, Adobe switched to a SaaS model where in order to keep using Adobe software, I need to continuously pay $60 a month to access that. If I stop paying, I can no longer access Adobe software, right? So it's just really important to be aware of that. It's important for early stage founders, especially to know this. So when they're trying to describe what business they are wanting to build or are building and operating, to use more than SaaS as a description of it, because it's not really telling the story of what kind of business you have. It's just telling people how you're making money. So that said, Craig, again, questions in the chat. What are your thoughts on the impact of AI on competition in the SaaS sphere? It's now much easier to launch or copy someone else's idea. That's their opinion on that. Let's hear yours.
Yeah. Um, I think they're absolutely right. It is becoming easy to copy ideas. Another issue that is feels similar to a founder that has a great idea that leverages AI is that a lot of people, since AI opened up the playing field for people who were not really coders, not really product creators, and is now giving them an avenue to be able to create a product without having quite the level of sophistication with actual technical and coding skills. It is creating a creator economy. So, because there's more creators in one space, a lot of people are going to have overlapping ideas. So, you're going to see a lot of different people, a lot of different startups, and a lot of different companies creating the creating a solution to a problem that's out there. They might be creating it in different ways. They're still competitors if they're solving the same problem. So, what we're going to see is a lot of companies solving the same problem. And it's also going to be challenging for venture capital to figure out which ones to invest in. So, they're going to be investing in a lot, like we've seen. At the same time, we'll also see their failure rate increase because markets are becoming red ocean markets immediately. And what I mean by red ocean is that a lot of companies are solving the same problem in the same way. So it's like if you imagine an ocean filled with too many sharks, the sharks are all going to be eating the other fish until there's none left. And you figure the other fish are kind of like your customer size, the market size, your TAM essentially. So um, because there are a limited number of customers in any case that will use a product to solve a specific problem, and they will typically only choose one product for a very specific use case. And in some case, there are companies that have a suite of products like Adobe does that Gary mentioned. So what we're going to see is there are going to be the competition is going to be more rigorous for sure. One thing that companies will need to figure out, and this has been since the beginning of history, what is the competitive moat of your company? What is the unique value proposition that is tough to replicate? And if a company can replicate it, um, what are you offering the customer other than solving their problem that helps their journey in solving their problem, that makes it more appealing for them essentially. And I can give you an example of like um the one of the solutions I'm creating right now, as I mentioned, empowering employees to be able to have the knowledge to start impacting their job in 90 minutes rather than 90 days. One of the big uh, points with that is like companies are figuring out, okay, what's the build versus buy analysis? Now that we kind of know what this product is and does, why not just build it internally because we have AI tools too? And I love this response because when you look at a regular company where they're not building their product as a company isn't increasing the value of employees. It's somebody's job in that company to increase the level of value that each employee can offer in a shorter amount of time. That's what the COOs, CFOs, the HR departments that are hiring want faster ramp time so that people can start making money for the company as soon as possible rather than these long, slow crawls. But to develop these systems in these companies, takes several $1,000,000 a year, and by the time a company actually, uh, centralizes it in their company, the LLM models have completely changed. In the next 3 years, the LLMs are gonna be either way more advanced, change completely, prompting's gonna evolve, the different strengths and weaknesses of each LLM's gonna evolve, and centralizing it to multiple employees is going to be a challenge because everybody uses AI differently, especially LLMs at different levels. and different effectiveness, and they communicate it with it differently, which all creates different quality responses. So when a company starts diving into how easy is this to replicate, you can try to copy something, but what's the build versus buy analysis say? So that's one way to look at it as a founder. Why would my customer not just do this themselves and figure out what is the competitive moat there? What makes them paying you more effective, efficient, financially sound? What makes you better than going with an internal solution that they can create? Do the same thing with your customers and look at what solutions already exist. I could say with my AI engine that analyzes competitive markets for companies, a lot of times startups will say, "Yeah, there's nothing like this out there." And 10 out of 10 times, there's something like that, exactly like that out there. Maybe not exactly, a little bit different, but it's important to figure out, okay, what is out there? How far along is it? Is it kind of at the level you envision? Is it tackling the same problem the same way? When I worked at Sync Sketch, and I'll kind of wrap up after this little piece because I know I'm going on. When I was at Sync Sketch, it was a remote collaboration tool for artists, animators, game developers, character designers. So it was a feedback tool for remote collaboration to kind of keep the entertainment industry going, especially during COVID. But it became so powerful, studios started using it even when people were called back into the studios and everything. And one of the things that gave SyncSketch such a big competitive advantage and why it was used by studios religiously as they create their products or projects. One of the big things was that it was so user friendly and had the exact artist tools that artists actually use and they're familiar with and they love. And because those were so sophisticated and so in line with the day to day usability and accuracy of artist tools that they use right there in the studio. That was a huge game changer. The other thing was working with 3D assets. That's another huge game changer. A lot of these platforms only facilitate two-dimensional content. So those are what I call competitive modes. They're very hard to replicate. Usability, hard to replicate for something that's a complex task like art and graphic design. Um, Technically sophisticated assets, working with those, that's a competitive mode. Not a lot of companies were doing that at the same time. And it's not that the market wasn't congested. You have all these other platforms. You have Frame.io, you have, I think it's called like Cage, you have Mudstack. You have all these different competitors out there that are doing things. I think when I did my competitive analysis, I had a total of like 15 or 16 competitors that were out there that could do. There's enough overlapping features in their use case that they could be considered a competitor. And I rank competitors first degree, second degree, third degree. Like, how much are they really directly competing with you versus indirectly? Indirectly would be something like um, cell phones, phone calls for communicating with people versus Zoom. I can use Zoom for a simple phone call. Would I? Probably not. I probably wouldn't even use a simple phone call for a simple phone call. I'd use a text. So they're all indirectly competing with those services. So think about that too. Um, but bottom line, competitive moat. You have to figure out why me instead of everybody else when you're working with it. And it usually relates to the customer. The answer isn't about you, it's about the customer.
Yeah, and that goes back to again doing the legwork of customer discovery and research before you start building anything. And you want to have these conversations to identify what your intended customers within the hypothesis of who you think is going to benefit the most and enjoy what you're going to offer them the most is currently doing. And like you said, what they're currently doing could be using a piece of software, or hiring, like actual people doing labor work for them, manual labor work. It could be them cobbling systems together on their own to achieve an outcome that they want. And they could be doing really wild stuff, right? So you really want to have these conversations and contextualize who they are, what their expectations are for something like this in the market, why they're looking for this, what they've done currently and in the past to seek that out, spend money on that. How often have they spent money on that? How much money? Where was, like, the cutoff line where they felt like this isn't worth trying, it's not worth paying money for, right? And then dig deeper into each of those answers to further contextualize all of that. And what's really, in my experience has been eye-opening is how little direct competition there is, especially at the earliest level, when you are truly creating something that is from a place where you're not trying to, like, copy other people and mimic them. You're coming up with your own ideas, your own innovations, your own designs, and it's based on the conversations you're having, the research you're doing, with a very specific mission and purpose and culture around that, right? And that's the difference between, like, In-N-Out Burgers and Burger King. They both sell burgers, right? But at the end of the day, you're gonna find more appeal to each of those for a drastic number of different factors, and each of those factors are being executed in their own ways that is changing how it's resonating with different types of people, right? So a lot of what you said is so important, and again, it's speaking to the foundation of what's going to make a person a strong entrepreneur, a strong product or service, designer, developer, and then eventually a strong executor and marketer and salesperson. So yeah, these are all really, really great tidbits that you've shared. We've got some more questions. So Karan Hadith over on YouTube is asking, I'm a CS sophomore right now. Do you think AI is the ultimate future? Should we pursue it through a formal degree or by self learning? And if through a degree, is it really taught effectively? Huh.
That's a good question. I mean, there's, I'd say, as someone who's interested in something like this and interested in how the future of things are going to evolve, always continue self learning no matter what. And no matter what your degree is, I could say my evolution into business itself. I started out as a creative. I did not like finance. I did not like numbers. I was not into a lot of the things that I am somehow the go-to person today in my life for a lot. I remember when I was working with Sync Sketch and I became kind of leading their finance, leading their business product tiering and different things. I looked back one day and was like, damn, I can't believe this happened. I remember the CTO said, hey, why don't you ask Craig this? He's the numbers guy. And I'm like, how the heck did I become the numbers guy? And it was through self exploration and then formal education. So I I started building teams globally for a post production company called Deluxe. They're kind of like a Technicolor. And through doing that, I was like, wow, this is kind of like building mini companies all over the world. And some of the processes were very more technical in nature. So that got me into the more business side of things and the operational side of things. So I left the creative part of the entertainment industry and started drifting towards the business side. Now, once I was into the business side of the entertainment industry, I wanted to evolve my skills more formally. So I went out, looked for a MBA where I can specifically work on the things that I felt like I was weak at or that scared me a little bit. I actually leaned into my fear of finance. And since that's what I concentrated on so hard during my MBA, when I started, I also started consulting with companies at the same time. So it was kind of like I knew my career was going to move into this direction. So I focus super hard on finance, financial modeling, growth in companies. The more kind of I knew I liked working with startups and new companies, and that's kind of what gravitated me towards that. And that, I guess, the difference there is that it doesn't relate to AI in a sense where, okay, AI is a little bit of a different beast. It's evolving very quickly, but the personal side of it, the motivation side for learning something new is very much the same. And for a lot of people, learning AI from a simple level, just tapping into an LLM like ChatGPT is a little scary for some people these days, especially if a company is more resistant to change or somebody's personal lifestyle is more resistant to change. So I'd say lean into that, and always start personal, because if you start looking and educating yourself personally, you'll know if if you really want to pursue it from a more formal education standpoint. Is formal education the only way to begin doing something in the real world for a company or for your company or for a startup? Absolutely not. I believe that people can, with the tools and resources that they have today, self educate themselves to success. And that takes a lot of personal motivation, but if you start digging into really effective online courses, I think I still listen to audiobooks, and once in a while we'll grab a Udemy course, especially for some of the certifications I have that have personal development stuff. I'm PMP certified, and I need to do a certain amount of education hours every 3 years or so to keep renewing that. All of the education hours I do are stuff that directly relate to my company, and a lot of it's AI. I'm looking at how AI can drive businesses, and I get a freedom of like what um, what content I want to absorb. So I make it all meaningful. I know some people when they do different courses, they'll just listen to or read or educate themselves on whatever just to get their units and move on. I'd say don't do that. That's the biggest waste of your time. If you really want to pursue something, and you have either requirements or obligations, make them useful to yourself, really empower yourself. I think that's what a lot of these companies want people who have their certifications to do, because that's really how they become successful. um, I myself, running an AI company, was not formally educated in AI. It didn't exist. I mean, I could go back to school for it now, but why? Like, I feel like now it's about self education. The other thing is being a jack of all trades is good to a certain level, but also counterproductive when you actually need deep expertise. So there's also caveats to that as well, where um, to run a company, you don't want to get too deep in everything, because you can't do everything as a founder or as a leader of a company. So you really want to get the specialists where you need a specialist. And I'd say learn enough about something so that you can make sound decisions from a leadership standpoint. Uh, and that's one of the important things that I started doing myself, because I just like finance and math, everything from coding to um, different languages to write in, and different ways to prompt even, and all these like there was a lot that I was unfamiliar with when I started with AI, and I was just the average Joe typing into Chat GPT. That evolved in a very massive way. I'm a totally different person than I was 2 years ago, because of the level of self education that I had to really create so that I can become a good leader myself with AI. So, yeah, there's no long story short to that. It's long story long. Is continue your journey to educate yourself. I think starting with self education is the best way, and formal education when you need it, kind of like what I did with finance and stuff. So. That's what I think.
No, that's I think wonderful advice, and I love that you're leading with essentially dipping your toes in it first, right? Like see how you experience it and what you either vibe with or what isn't clicking and makes you realize, nah, I don't really see the benefit in like investing capital into this through formal education. But again, like you kind of touched on, there are some formal educational opportunities that might be either free or very, very low cost. I, want to also stress community colleges are absolutely wonderful outlets to education in different ways. There's also different extension programs at a lot of universities that don't work towards, providing credits for a degree, and thus they're a lot cheaper, and you can still, gain all those same lessons, the same education. And what's great about a formal education opposed to on your own is that formal education process is linear. It's providing you with step-by-step process to continuously build on what you were first exposed to, and expand on that knowledge and those skills, versus trying to do it on your own. It can be more like opening up a jigsaw puzzle box and throwing it all over the floor and trying to make sense of things. Like, where does this fit in? How does this relate to what I already know? Or what did I just learn, and how does that fit into this other thing that I don't know already? Like, you can be very kind of lost and confused in different areas while you're trying to do that. But at the end of the day, everyone learns differently, and it's really important too in terms of dipping your toes in, these different things, to practice mindfulness and self-awareness, and really, figure out what works best for you. So, the heart of all of it really is exposure and trying, but also being very patient with things, right? Because the worst thing you can do in a lot of cases is rush ahead. I see this all the time, whether it's someone rushing to get a degree that they felt pressured into, like, oh, my parents really want me to be a doctor, for example. But I never wanted to be a doctor. And you go to school and you spend 15 years of your life becoming a doctor, only to be like, I hate this. Like, this isn't for me. I'm stressed out. I can't handle what I'm dealing with. It's too much. It's too intense. I want to, be a photographer, for example, right? So it's really important to listen to yourself and live as authentically as you can based on what is best for you. So, really good advice. We got some really
Yeah.
interesting questions coming up. Um,
Can I just add on
yeah.
real fast to what you were saying? So when I got my MBA, I'll do a very small plug here for the college that I did. It was Western Governors University, which is an online school. When I was going, it was back in 2018 or 2019. Um, so colleges weren't as remote as they are now, and they actually had a super bad rap where like there were I remember going to family gatherings, and when I was telling people, oh yeah, I'm doing an online college for my MBA, it's self-paced, all that jazz, and it had this really kind of like poor stigma to a lot of people that I was discussing it with. And then COVID happened, and all of a sudden, every college started becoming some kind of remote program or whatever. But even beyond that, some people say, like, oh, well, if it's not Stanford or Harvard or Yale that I'm going to, what's the point? And I'll tell you what the point is. I did my MBA self-paced. I rushed through it in a year, did really well, and I got competent at the things that I wanted to get super competent in. So um, was that degree successful? Yes. How do I know it was successful? Within a year and a half, less than 2 years after getting that degree, I ramped a company up from 0 to 1, and we exited out of acquisition through Unity Technologies, which at the time was one of the biggest. And there's still, I think, over 70% market share in the mobile gaming industry, somewhere around there. Don't quote me on that, but if you have 70% market share in anything, you're the company for that. So one thing I want to say is it didn't matter if I went to Harvard or Yale or Stanford or anywhere. I did what all those people aspire to do. And was it because of the degree there? No, it wasn't just because of the degree at Western Governors University, but it absolutely helped. It served the purpose that I went there, and went to those online courses each day. It served the purpose that I wanted to use it for to do what I ended up doing. Didn't need Stanford. Is Stanford awesome if you get in and they give you a scholarship or you have money to throw at it? Do it. Why not? If you have the time and it's going to be as meaningful for you. But everything I do, and you're going to start learning this with your companies as well, everything you do has to be meaningful. I have a quote, I call it the 4 M's. The first is be mindful, figure out what you want, what you need, and be mindful of everything that's involved with it. The next step is be um, so mindful is the first, meaningful is the second. Everything you do, have it have meaning for you, for others, for the company. Don't just do things to do them. One of the big things that a lot of companies do is say, how do we reduce the number of features, the number of specs these features need, the different things to simplify things? And that's kind of a similar process to doing things that are meaningful only. Cut the junk out. Everybody does junk every day that they don't have to do. Stop doing it. And when you become a leader of a company that's growing, you figure out how important that is. The next is to be mighty. Nothing comes easy. There's competition out there. There's stuff that'll happen. Like I said, that line from what reality is versus the big squiggle of, sorry, what you vision, that straight line, that's really a giant squiggle of reality. Reality is a mess. Go through it, stay strong, believe in yourself, hang out with people that believe in you. Your friends should evolve with you as you lead your company and grow with your company. So should your friends and who you hang out with on every level of yourself really needs to keep you both sound, strong, and grounded in the things you do every day and have a big support system for that. And the last part of the 4 M's is I say be someone's miracle. And that means never stop adding value to people's lives and doing things. It's why I do these calls. It's why I do a lot of the things I do. I make connections constantly because I want to hopefully be a miracle moment for someone, whether it's just a miracle part of their day or a miracle part of their year or life. It doesn't matter. Just that's really what being a good person is, and that's what being a leader is. So kind of those 4 M's: be mindful, meaningful, mighty, and somebody's miracle, and go with that. But
I love
little
it.
little tangent there.
No, it's good. I think it's important too when it comes to like, mission statements and being, clear on what your culture is. When it comes to like, when you're going to start a business and run a business and lead a business, you need to start with yourself and define those things for yourself. And you want your business to reflect that and represent that. That way it's authentic and that's going to resonate with people. And also in regards to like, because this comes up a lot of, I see this every day. Uh, Founders, entrepreneurs essentially whining about how lonely it is. And it kills me because it's like, that's a choice. You're making a choice to be lonely because you're sacrificing meaningful relationships with the people who love you and that you've known, your friends and family, to be obsessive working on owning your business and cutting them out and only trying to build friends who are also, in business, making money or, trying to do this. And it's counterproductive because it's taking all of these sources of joy and support out of your life to surround yourself with people who are one dimensional and they're a mirror of you being one dimensional, right? And so as a human being, you need a lot more than just other people who are in business, right? So I just want to touch on that. And Craig, can we go over a little bit of time because we got a couple more questions, if that's
Yeah, well,
good?
let's go all day if we need to.
Okay, awesome, cool. So yeah, there's some really great questions that TQ Mid still has, and then Mia's been waiting to learn about pitch decks a little bit here. So Mia shared and asks, I'm currently working on a pitch deck or on my pitch deck. There's a lot of AI used because I started with the TensorFlow model, but then found out that image classification wasn't enough, so we're switching to Gemini with building, I think, the actual product, the MVP. First of all, I don't know where to send it, the pitch deck. I'm thinking about reaching out to Discord and Reddit, but I'm not familiar with any platforms to test it out with people. But hopefully that would be done once I rewrite the MVP. So there's a couple different elements going on with Mia with regards to one, constructing a pitch deck that's effective, knowing who to send that to, but also leveraging the MVP that they're building to start to test that and see if the MVP is capable of providing people with, again, an enjoyable experience and benefits that it's meant to provide people with. So what kind of insights, feedback, advice do you have in regards to both those different, angles?
I'd say join something like 805 startups that have tons of available resources with people to offer feedback on these types of things. Um, with pitch decks, you'll find different VCs, if you're looking for investment, have uh, some of them have formats that they typically like that you can pull from. A lot of people pass them around. Like Sequoia has their own pitch deck format. Andreas and Horowitz might along there. But definitely uh, talk to founders in terms of the development stage of your pitch deck and try to get as much feedback as possible. One of the best pieces of advice that I can give startups and founders in general when creating a pitch deck is that it's already too long. Um, the most effective pitch deck, and there was actually a book on pitching, and there was a movie, I forget which one it was, but literally one sentence caused a writer to sell his script to a different company other than Disney, just by saying, "Oh, so what you're actually creating with this movie is Disney's," and then the movie title. And the writer kind of was off put by that because that's really what Disney does is it's always Disney so and so, not Craig Silverstein so and so or Mark so and so story. So with that one word, that one sentence concept, all of the sudden, the script didn't go to Disney. It went to a different studio. And that's a pitch. That's you caused a direct action, massive business transaction changed because of one sentence. And look for those catalysts with your product, with your company that will cause a venture capital studio to say, I am stupid if I don't do this. If I do not explore more about this company and explore more about this founder, then I am a sucker. That's what you want someone feeling like at the end of the pitch deck. You want them to be obsessed and thinking about your product after you leave the room. And more importantly, you want them to be thinking about you after you leave the room because the founders are what a VC is investing in. You could have an awesome product, but if they don't think you're capable of bringing it to market, you're not worth the paper the deck's written on in terms of being the leader for your product. So you want to convey that to a venture capital studio as well in the deck or in the meeting. So always have your team slide there as well. But I would say join groups, get feedback in terms of where to put the deck. Um, that's a good question. I bootstrapped a lot of my companies, and in terms of uh, using the pitch deck, typically I'd give it to contacts who are familiar with the VCs or know the VCs and would find a way to get it in front of the right people. But that's one thing you can do on LinkedIn. Very frequently, I see people post lists of venture capital studios and emails and different things like that. That's a kind of like a cold email, cold call way to do it. If you want to try to get your deck in front of someone, but I would more use that information to find people to talk to and reach out to really get the inside angle. Um, but before putting your deck out there, make it good, shorten it, get feedback, lots and lots of feedback. And one thing about feedback with founders, and I talk to serial entrepreneurs, I talk to people who have houses up in Beverly Hills, who have sold companies and are completely business oriented, and they still fall into the trap of not receiving feedback as something that they need to think critically about. Um, so don't fall into that trap. Anyone, anywhere can fall into the trap of becoming defensive about feedback with things like your pitch deck, with things like your company. Even if the feedback sounds like it's nonsense, to someone who said it, it might not necessarily be nonsense. So think about it and consider it. And it's one of the hardest things I think for founders to do sometimes is to say, hey, and do this with people you trust, but say, hey, somebody brought up this thing about my product and it's kind of irking me a little bit. I don't know if it's true or if I should just shrug it off, but I want to know if I should not just shrug this off because it could make or break whether somebody invests in my company. And I think that's really important for founders to have the nerves and the muscle to really, it's uncomfortable criticizing yourself or thinking, hey, maybe this idea needs some work or it needs to be reshaped a little bit. I'd say if you're really passionate about an idea or a problem you're solving, just because it faces criticism does not mean it's a bad idea. It might mean the idea needs to be reworked to meet the reality that we live in. But it's something that founders should very deeply consider.
Yeah, this is all great tidbits of advice. I would like to expand a little bit on some of this stuff, but working backwards, yeah, what you're kind of like touching on is when an investor is investing in your company, they're investing in the founder team first, and they want to know that that team is, like I said in the text chat, they're great listeners. They're listening well, right? And the other element that's attached to that is that they're coachable. They're not going to be in pure defense mode. They're not going to like be subjected to their own hubris and stubborn, not willing to change or do anything. But they also aren't looking for people who are going to be blindly following any bit of advice or feedback from anyone that comes across them, no matter how important they are perceived to be. What they want to see, if they're good investors, is that you're collecting all this information and trying to formulate new hypotheses around that, and then test the hypothesis and see if that feedback is correct, if that fits within the unique context of you, your team, your product, your service, your market, all those different elements that are at play at all times and constantly changing. So be aware of that. As for your advice for finding people who are connected to the VCs that you may be connected to, that's beautiful. It's another problem that a lot of people have is they overlook the relationships they already have. They don't try to figure out, who do I know who would really enjoy what I'm trying to do, that I should talk to about this, that I should learn from, and not like immediate pitch to, but just try to approach them as a mentor and see if they're willing to give you advice and insights and talk to you about these things. Whether that's a pitch or your product or service, your branding, any aspect of your business, whatever. Just remember to be gracious, be respectful. Don't ask for a lot. You're asking for favors from these people. So keep in mind that the favor that you should first be asking of them is something that could be done in 10, 15 minutes. Maybe it's asking them to grab coffee with you and spend 30 minutes grabbing coffee so you can ask them about like a certain thing. And I love how you use those examples of, hey, I was talking to this other person. You don't have to name them. You can just say, hey, I was talking to this, like, potential, mentor or, advisor or something. And they mentioned this, and I'd love to get your take on that because you have done this, and I really admire you for these reasons. Make it clear why you're reaching out to them, even if it's a friend. Like, right? It's so important to be direct and uh, to the point as to why them, because that's gonna make them feel respected and empowered to share with you, but also as it lets them know that you took your time to really consider this and not try to just waste everyone's time around you. When it comes to like the pitch decks and sending it out, yeah, like the best thing you can do if you're going cold is reach out to investors as if they are your mentors and do exactly that. Be like, hey, I really, love what you've done with this. You have experience investing in these types of companies. Can I buy you coffee? Spend, 30 minutes with you. I'm kind of struggling with like, putting in this pitch deck. I haven't done it, too often. And I just love to get your insight on it, like real simple stuff. See where that goes. And don't be defensive or upset if you don't get a response. Everyone in this world is so busy and being just drowned in existential crises and then personal crises and all number of different things that you have no awareness of, right? So remember, we're all humans and respect that. If you don't hear back, follow up in like 3 months. That way it's not annoying. It's enough time to pass so they, maybe they forgot about you. It's fine. And then reach out to them again and ask them, if timing's working out better. And by the way, I'd love to update you and share that since I last contacted you, I reached out to you, I did this. I heard from this person and we applied it in this way and it was amazing. And it makes me more excited to hear from you because of this, right? You're building a parasocial relationship in that case because you're not actually connecting, but they're reading the updates that you're sending them and they're following your story. And stories are what sell. Stories are what makes people connected to each other and to your product, your brand, what you're trying to do. And when it goes back to the pitch deck, your pitch deck is a persuasive story. The landing page is a persuasive story. And Craig, you did a great job. Really calling attention to designing that story around the audience. Like you said, that one sentence pitch was so well designed for the specific person, that audience, that it resonated and it made them go, holy cow, yes, we can't pass, we don't want Disney to have this. We want this, right? So these are really great tidbits that you shared. And hopefully this helps flesh things out a little bit more for people. Mia is saying, wow, that was amazing advice, by the way. I really appreciate the depth you went into to respond to my question. Great job, Craig. I thought that pitch decks had to be long, more than 20 pages. That this will certainly change the directory of company. Okay, so Mia, Craig, I posted a link. I looked at the rough draft of the deck. It's entirely too long, but I want to make a clear distinction that the length of the deck isn't tied to slides alone. I've seen incredible decks that were over 75 slides, 100 slides, but each one of those slides were designed so effectively and so minimally that the pacing of going through the deck, every slide was a little bonbon. I say this all the time. It was a little bonbon, just popped into my brain. I digested it immediately. It was delicious, and I went on to the next slide. And I've seen this done in slides that were emailed. I've seen this done with slides that are used as visual presentations or visual aids for a verbal presentation, an in-person presentation. Be aware of the pacing and the amount of information on each slide as to not overwhelm someone. You want it to be, again, very easy to digest, really easy to understand and follow, and you want the story structure to be logical, like any great story. You're not writing a pitch deck as if this is Memento. If you haven't watched the movie Memento, go watch it.
Good one.
Yeah, it'll make your brain go like, what the fuck am I watching right now? What is going on? You don't want that for your pitch deck. You want it to be very logical and simple, like a children's story. And really like lean into that. Like the way the slides are designed should be as if it's a child that's digesting it. Now, don't, go too far into that where you're talking down to these people as if they are children, but the least or the less effort a person needs to exert using their brain to follow along, the more they're going to stay with you as you complete that story instead of going like, I don't have time. I don't know what's going on. I need to leave. So Mia, you've got so much text and you've got your story structure all over the place. Think logically. How can I build on this? Just like, linear education. the introduction, first slide, title slide, it needs to say real clearly what it is that you're doing in clear, common, easy to understand language, no jargon. And then you build on that. The next, section is getting a little bit more into that. You can kind of touch on the problem, and then go into your product, your solution, how you're addressing this, and then go into the market, and then go into the larger opportunities, and then finish with your team. That way, people go, oh, I love everything I've read and I understand, and now you're hitting me with who you are to add extra trust and belief that you're right for this, right? And there are some stories you can tell with your pitch that involves you and your team if it was very specific to why you created this, you experienced this problem. So when you're telling the problem, you can showcase how you experienced this and learned about this problem. Maybe you are a marketing person and you're struggling with all these different marketing channels and whatnot, and you're like, dude, I need this, I made this, and this is why I created this solution, right? That's relevant, it makes sense. But if there's a disconnect and it's not really like how you came up with it, don't force it like that. Don't try to like jump ahead and mix all these different storylines and plots together, because again, simple characters, simple arcs, simple plot lines, simple. Okay, but yeah, that's enough from me. We got more questions. Craig, if you have anything else to add to that one, feel free while I tee this up.
Yeah, I would just say I took a look at the first few pages of the deck, and I think actually one solid use case for AI. There's some slides that have like paragraph chunks in it. You want to stay away from those because they're tough for people to get into, especially a lot of these investors look at decks all day long, especially if they're not necessarily one of the top partners in a firm, but their like job is literally to scan through decks. So you want to be cognizant that they don't want to read a lot. They want very punchy, specific points. And one great use case for AI could be, and I'll kind of give away some special sauce secrets. Look for specific documents out there, either floating out on LinkedIn, like white papers or little slides that people put out there on like how to improve your pitch deck or whatever, and find some that are like people say, yes, this is 100% the best advice on creating slides in a pitch deck or content for a pitch deck. Upload that to your LLM, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini, and say, hey, look at these best practices. Which of these are good? And like start talking with AI so it kind of understands and backs up what actually makes a good slide deck. And then take one of your slides and say, this is kind of some paragraphs there. What might be the best way, or what are alternative ways to make this more concise and punchy following the best practices in this white paper? All of a sudden it's drawing a parallel between best practices and then the way your deck actually exists in reality, and it starts to target potential ways to evolve that. So that's one way to actually use AI for this type of situation. But there's also nothing better than asking for feedback from people who look at these decks all the time. So before you start live pitching it, get that feedback from mentors, from founders, from people like Gary and people that he surrounds himself with in the startups groups, things like that, because the feedback's good, but for refining, AI is great for that stuff. I'd say a lot of times the answers you'll get back, it'll be good at maybe like shortening something. You can even say, hey, I want this done in 20 words, not 100 words. So it'll start trimming stuff down. And it might not be good what it gives you back initially. It might sound like, hey, this was generated by AI. That's up to you to say, okay, I see what it did to shorten this. Now I'm going to put my own brain power into really making it a home run for this slide. And that's one way to go about it as well.
No, I love that too. And again, it's great as an exercise, just kind of feel things out and test things. But I also want to add real quick, use more visuals that are demonstrated from a day in the life of human perspective. I cannot stand seeing abstract illustrations to demonstrate what your product is and who it's for and how it works and what the problems are. No, walk us through the actual user experience, the lived experience of experiencing that problem. Take a storyboard approach to this. And if you're not sure what storyboards are, they're incredible tools used for filmmaking, but at the heart of it, it's a comic strip. That's what it is. If you're familiar with comic strips and graphic novels, before a film is created, they essentially create a comic strip that's showcasing all of the core screens or scenes that they intend to shoot and what angle and how to go about that. And these are usually very rough, right? But you want to take that sort of storyboard approach to demonstrate what that experience is as a human being to live that problem. And then the same thing, show us what that experience is to experience your product, to use your product. And you don't have to use, like, again, 50 slides, 100 different screens. Focus on the core aspects of your user experience that you've created that is going to make it unquestionably clear what it is you're doing, who it's for, how they experience it, where the benefits of that are, how that's more enjoyable from what already exists, and what makes that unique also from what already exists, and thus valuable, right? So simple. Like, the best pitches I've ever seen are so great at just walking us through these two experiences. And there's an old Google commercial that kind of is like capturing the heart and soul of what I'm talking about, making it human. It was a Super Bowl commercial probably 10 years ago now. And all it was on the screen was someone using Google search. And it started with, how do I ask someone out? And then the next search was, where do I get, reservations for a date? And then it built on that to eventually booking a wedding. And then, having kids. And it was just like the most human, heartfelt demonstration of how this product applies to real people and how they use it. Think about that with your product, with your service, and take that approach to what you put into your pitch deck and, most importantly, what you put on your landing page to sell people what this is, right? So, yeah, I just want to throw that out there real quick. But yeah,
Just
yeah.
just one tiny thing, because I think it's super important. Probably one of the most important things anyone will say on this call all day is a lot of people don't know really deep down what making something a story or the power of story actually means. So Gary was just using the word storyboard a lot. And it's like when you think of storyboard, yes, you think of pictures, but pictures are more of the display mode of the emotion and point you're trying to get across. Now, there's a company that I'm pretty familiar with that they work on muscular dystrophy kind of therapeutics. And one of the big things they say, they talk about data points all the time. Biotech is boring. They talk about data, they talk about regulations, and they talk about rules. There's nothing more off putting as somebody reading something than looking at some of the stuff. But what their CEO, the CEO of this company, says very frequently, one of the things that they measure for the effectiveness of their drug, their therapy, is upper limb motion for somebody with muscular dystrophy. Now, when you think of upper limb motion, that's great. Okay, data point there, there's no story in there. But then the CEO says, what we like to call this is uh, a child's ability to hug their mother. All of the sudden, there is emotion added to this therapy that they're doing. There's understanding, there's clarity, there's, wow, this is impactful. You mean there's a child who can't hug their parent, and this is changing that with just that one sentence. upper limb motion that we are measuring the effectiveness of this drug, we like to call somebody's ability to hug their mother. It's boom. That's a sell. That's a story that people can get attached to. Those are the critical elements between getting funding and not getting funding a lot of the time.
Or getting a sale. And it goes back to, again, what you touched
Yeah.
on initially was understand your audience, know your audience, and the pitch that you tell one investor may be drastically different to another in terms of the nuances that you add. Like the overarching story might be the same, but you might shift the focus of some of these stories within the larger story, or your persuasive story of your pitch, to really resonate with them and their lived experience, their values, their culture, their, wants and expectations and desires to, see something like this exist or get that thing, right? So important. Okay, let's jump to a couple other questions. I just said last call for questions. If anyone new just joined in, we have a couple of people have cycled in over on LinkedIn. We're going back to TQ Mid, who posted a lot of great questions. So the first one is actually above me, as over in Star Model where I posted. So TQ Mid asks, in your experience, what's the biggest mistake technical founders make in the first 18 months of go to market? And how did you avoid it or recover from it? Looking back at your exit, if you could restructure your cap table and fundraising strategy from day one, what would you change and why? Oh, there's a bunch of different questions here. All right, so let's start with the first one, the mistakes. The first one.
Okay, mistakes in go to market for technical founders. Um, there are several. I think not understanding the context and the daily life and experiences of the customer is always number one. So it's very easy, and I hear people say this all the time on LinkedIn. It's very easy to build a product that nobody will use. It's probably one of the easiest things to do. But building a product that people start using and figuring out how to measure the value of it is super important. And that's where, I mean, that's where the business things come into play. And that's where, hey, the MBA was good at looking at some of this stuff, but some of it came from experience as well. And some of it came from interviewing people at VCs saying like, hey, what are you measuring for your startups? What's most important to you? And a lot of them say lifetime value, LTV to CAC ratio. That's lifetime value to cost of acquiring a customer. So in going to market, you want to think of those things like how much will a customer spend with me over the course of their lifetime with using my product versus how much am I actually spending to acquire that customer. And acquiring customer involves marketing and sales costs pretty much, the stuff that it's going to take to really lock them in and have them start spending money with you. The other thing is expansion revenue rates. So you want to look at not just will my customer spend for a SaaS model, uh, will they spend $10 a month with me for the rest of their life, or will they spend $10 the first month and then start expanding their usage or expanding the product suite that they have so that next month they're spending 15, next month they're spending 25, next month 50. So those are things that really um, determine the successful go to market of a product. And I don't want to say those determine, that's actually, let me back up. Those metrics illustrate the success of a go to market strategy. What determines the success of a go to market strategy is your ability to put mechanisms in place in your product and your business model so that it's a natural full momentum of growth for every single user. And a lot of that goes back to, yes, understanding the customer, the use case, the value that you add for that customer. One of the big things for a company like SyncSketch that I helped scale, they did something really well, which was make sharing links super easy to content. So people within a studio who are working on a project just need to drop a link to somebody and they immediately get sucked into a workspace where they can work on that content. So that easy use and ability to share the product started making it very easy for people who have never even used it before the system to jump right in. And because they concentrated so strongly on ease of use within the interface itself and made it very intuitive, as new people started getting invited in these workspaces, they would start working right away with very little roadblock to actually become an active user. It's another thing to track if you're a tech business, daily active users. Make sure that number keeps going up. Um, Daily active users, monthly active users, how many users are coming back consistently each day. So as that number grows, your go to market is really starting to get successful. But also the ability to invite someone into a workspace super easy and start working on content, they end up increasing the spend of each customer, each workspace that's actually there. So let's say I'm from Studio A and I say, okay, this small team can start working within this workspace. There's 20 users. We'll spend whatever for those 20 users. All of a sudden, they're inviting all these people and they went to 100 users. It's like, holy crap, me as a finance person in this company is like, why the heck are people spending so much money on this product now? I thought it was going to be 20 users a month. Now it's 100. That's a sign that you have built mechanisms in your product that are built for growth. And that's what you want to start with as a technical founder is yes, the technical part is very important and the use case, but also think about as a technical founder the ability to nurture growth through mechanisms. That's going to be super important.
Love it. Okay, now moving on to the next question. Looking back at your exit, if you could restructure your cap table and fundraising strategy from day one, what would you change and why?
So for the Sync Sketch exit, I wasn't a co-founder. I was on the transaction side and led the transaction. For my company now, that's something I'm working on actually. It's a really good question. Um, Cap tables are I'd say a couple of things. A lot of companies for their co-founding team often split equity down the middle, or let's say they have a couple of founders and they do certain things. I'd say it's important to align the cap table with the value and the impact that each role has on the company. It's just fair that way. So for the founding team, consider that I'd say it's a lot better to have co-founders if you're looking for investments because it builds integrity into and de-risks a little bit. One person controlling a massive part of the company that has all the decision making power, it increases risk. The less people who can impact something at a certain level or a certain way adds more risk because something happens to that person and all of a sudden the company becomes irrelevant. So um, think about those things. But as cap tables get more complex, there are tools to help plan and actually issue shares of a company if you convert to a, a C corp. And I think, don't quote me on it. It might be JP Morgan has a free tool. I know they have a tool. One of the big banks out there has a tool, and you can actually talk to whatever bank you work with because sometimes they have free tools or very low cost tools for managing and actually issuing um, shares of your company. But look at best practices. Every company is slightly different. Um, some companies are, yeah, I'd say because I worked with a lot of bootstrap companies, it was the cap tables were pretty simple. That's one of the beauties of not having investors, and especially multiple investors. But I'd say the tools from the banks make things very simple. It's a good way to go for actually keeping track of what's going on and measuring the impact down the line. Sometimes they have forecasting tools, or sometimes they say like set aside these shares, like choose how many shares of your company or what percent of your company you want to issue and save for investment versus other things, and it'll show you dilution as well as you start doing different rounds of funding and things like that.
Yeah, it's good too that you're kind of touching on how every situation is unique in terms of how much equity and what equity is valued at and all that. But really, in terms of the cap table, especially if you're going to be looking at multiple rounds, even the first one, they're looking at simplicity. They want a simple cap table. They want you to be able to justify why this person's on the cap table and why they have that much equity as well. And at the end of the day, ultimately, if you're able to really, provide that justification, a clear methodology for how you arrived at that, then you're probably going to be able to, like, navigate that effectively. In some cases, yeah, you might need to clean that up. It might have to take a lot of work to clean that up. Um, and that's where, like, yeah, the cost can come in, working with a lawyer, buying someone out, whatever it might be. And you got to be aware too, the people that you bring into the cap table with that alignment, they need to be on board with what that, what the future fundraising will be and where they fit into that. um, what you really can't do is rush into these things and avoid working with a suitable lawyer and proper contracts and being effective at communicating with everyone, the different parties that are going to be on that cap table, what everyone's getting, why they're getting it, and most importantly, how you're going to handle conflict resolution and possible buyouts or exits with different people in different types of situations. And that also is where a suitable lawyer is going to be invaluable to ensure that if things get a little bit rocky, and they often do, that you all already agreed upon how to handle that and you all felt good with that, so you can always, in those tumultuous times where you're having that conflict, kind of calm things down by saying, wait, why are we arguing right now? We agreed, this is the terms, let's look at the contract, we handled this, okay, this is how we agreed to handle this, okay, cool. And it should, if everyone's of healthy mind and body, be able to let go of some of those personal feelings and go, okay, no, that's right. This is what we agreed to. So hopefully, isn't that, again, that's in a perfect world, but at least you have the tools to fall back on. So be aware of that. Next question, Craig. What's one operational system or framework you implemented that delivered asymmetric returns as you scaled? Something non-obvious that most founders overlook. You kind of touch on your 4Ms, which fits into this in some regards. But yeah, what else you got?
So hold on, because that question was
It's
all
yeah, it's the
had
last.
some
It's the
layers. Can you,
yeah above Mia's question in the chat. It's the one paragraph right above it.
okay. Eric Smith, the biggest mistake. Oh, um, so it's a great question. It's a situational question. It depends on the product, the way your customers interact with it. I would say there are some things that work really well. I can give an example with one of the products I worked with was very heavy in the education space. They dealt their biggest customers were universities and colleges and things like that in the arts. Um, they weren't making a ton of money off of it because the universities were pretty price sensitive and they really needed to scale up to actual enterprise and be able to facilitate enterprise value to actual industry professionals in the entertainment industry. And I think uh, The very big positive side is that they had tons of users, even though they were very strong in the university space. But a lot of users in studios or independent companies would also work with the product. But one of the big things is, okay, now it's time to monetize for enterprise value so we can actually make enough revenue to sustain ourselves and to build ourselves. It was immensely valuable to have quantity of in terms of users and daily active users so that you can figure out how to monetize them appropriately. So the usage was there, the business model was not yet there. So do not feel like you can't change your business model to become a sustainable company. And that means, okay, if you start off with, like, let's say one tier of a SaaS product and it's just one thing, you can look at multiple tiers of something for different use cases. So then you have your education use case, then you have your for Sync Sketch, education was a very lightweight tier. Then you have a pro tier, team tier, and your actual enterprise tier. And team tier actually came later. It turned out there was a huge gap between one tier of usage and the enterprise tier, the pro and enterprise tier. They're that having too big of a gap between features and use cases and different things was actually detrimental. So you change the feature structure at each tier and it changes the business model and the way you monetize each user. It's very impactful to have all those users there. Now, there's a caveat to this because as you change a business model, users get ticked off, and especially the users that are negatively impacted. There is a right way and a wrong way to do it, both from the actual business model and monetization standpoint, and also from the communication standpoint. I think communicating changes with customers in an appropriate way, and I can give uh, examples actually that are public and everyone's very familiar with. So there's examples like Sync Sketch where, yeah, we added more tiers, we moved some features around, and especially going from startup mode to, okay, now we're facilitating almost every major studio that's out there. You need to put on the kind of big boy shoes or whatever, boots, fill those boots and say like, yeah, we need to do certain things. We need to raise prices. We can't have a massive studio that was our first customer paying $2 a month for the rest of their life when these other studios are paying $100 a month. It just doesn't make sense. We can't do it. So look at things like that, but communicate things. So Sync Sketch did it really well as I helped transition the business models into a more sustainable, monetizable um, business model. It worked out really well. We communicated very clearly with customers. We knew that there would always be churn. And this is another metric you want to follow is churn versus the lifetime value, because churn affects how much a customer will spend. So churn is when a customer leaves you because could be competition, could be erased prices. Anytime you change features, change pricing, especially if it's raising pricing, people will leave. You'll increase your product one penny too much for somebody, and because of that, they will leave. You have to measure, is there going to be a net positive impact? And is it the net positive impact that's right for us and for our customers and for the long-term value of this? And a lot of it has to do with moral integrity of how you communicate and what you're actually doing with your product. We've seen things where people raise prices and it increases value, and over time it increases uh, the number of customers you have over time. There might be some churn, but overall the feature tiering, whatever, might actually attract more customers, especially more of the right types of customers. So you have to bucket your users as well. into, okay, this is the user that's going to be most profitable. Look at lifetime value. These people are spending the most over their lifetime with us. But don't forget about the other tiers because they are all meaningful. Unity Technologies had a very controversial price change. They called it their runtime fee for using the game engine, and that had so much pushback when they released it. It was, some people said, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, and I mean, I have my own opinions on things, and kind of could see some freight trains coming from miles away. But when you divert from your values, and it looks like, whether it's true or not, whether it's based on pure greed, you will lose lots of customers, enough where if you're a public company like Unity, you see insanely large retraction in stock price and value of the company itself and users. So you have to be careful on monetization and the way things are done. Um, it's like I said, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. One of the things that fixes that, and I actually came up with a model that I've shared with a lot of people. Look at your values as a company. Say, does this pricing change? Does this feature change? Does our the way we're changing our product align with our values? That's first. The next is messaging, and that has to deal with communication. If we make this change, how do we communicate this in a way that aligns with our values, aligns with our customers' needs, and also aligns with our business needs? And then there's the implementation aspect of it. Um, you're impacting customers, you're impacting their daily work. If you hold them and their work hostage, there's resentment. You'll get more churn. Um, they'll look for someone else. I know um, McDonald's coffee they almost doubled their prices in coffee. For some reason, I love the taste of McDonald's coffee. I stopped buying it when they doubled prices. I went back, they actually cut their prices in half again. So different things. It's just human nature, the way people react to things. So I think values, messaging, and actual rollout, the operations of the rollout and impact of certain things. You have to have a sustainable business. It doesn't help customers if your business isn't able to, in the long term, support their needs and grow as a business. So, I mean, you have to do what's best for you as well. But that should all be communicated. One of the big things are new features, bigger impact, especially if the studios are saying, hey, we want this feature and it's very expensive for your company to build, but you're going to do it because you know it will have long term value for multiple customers, not even just one. Um, that customer should be okay with you raising prices because you're literally building something that makes your product more valuable for them. And if they're buying your product now, they'll buy it later for a little more if you're increasing the value that you're offering them. So things like that are super important as well. Um, that is that's the big thing there, I think, for that
Yeah,
type of model.
I like what you're talking about with your model, starting with what I refer to and others often, like your compass, your North Star. And that's your mission statement, your value statement, your cultural statement, your vision statement. These things are something that, again, founders overlook, they disregard, they devalue. They should exist before you start doing anything, before you start building anything and you start testing anything. Define those for yourself and then for the business. And again, those should be in alignment. And then before you make any decision, always refer back to those guiding principles, those guiding documents. They serve as your compass. Are you in alignment or not? And when you're thinking about branding, either establishing a brand or maintaining a brand, improving your brand, the more all of those things are in alignment, the stronger the brand becomes because you're consistent. And that consistency is essentially either establishing or reinforcing what people are understand about you and your company and your products or services, right? And when that starts to not be in alignment, it invites a lot of pushback or concern or questioning about what it is that you actually stand for and what you're doing and why you're doing it and all those different elements. And that's where things go really awry. So yeah, I love that your system that you mentioned, it begins with that. Um, yeah. All right. So we got one, two, three, four more questions, and these are the ones that are already in here. Corporate over on YouTube says, "Thank you, Craig and Gary, for taking time to do this. Good vibes. Thank you for answering my question. I've learned a lot." Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Again, great job, Craig. So thankful that you're here to help out. Going back to questions, how do you distinguish between being too early versus having a distribution problem? What specific test did you run to validate you were in the window?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say being too early means you don't have the right MVP for the right time. I think it goes back, if you're building a product and you're going to market, you should be concentrating. MVP stands for minimum viable product. So you want to build, if you take out all of the fluff, all of the feature, you're looking at one use case where somebody can start using your product and will give you $1 to use it. They always say in a company, the first dollar is the hardest one to make. Once you get there, once people are actually willing to pay for your product, you have something that can potentially scale. So I think that is the first step, is it, make sure your MVP can solve a problem, and you don't have to go to market. I think the go to market strategy actually determines whether something's too early or not too early. I think you can start in pilot mode. Like I mentioned, my company's working with this employee impact program. It's AI powered role planning, using Minerva Engine, which is the business intelligence suite, does massive, easy, lightweight, but very deep analytics on a company, and is able to create context of what a role actually looks like within the company and how to plan based on the company's actual priorities and mission and operations and everything going on within the company. Now, this sounds like a very heavy lift for a company to start doing. It's actually, I could run it on almost any company in any role without even talking to the company. So that means for the company to actually start using it, it's a super low lift. What I did was take what could be a very complex program and lower the barrier to entry to zero. That means if you can lower the barrier to entry that much, people can start using it right away. Then it becomes a capacity problem. How many people can start using it right away? And is it an appropriate time for companies to start using it? I think the next step is work with companies that you have connections with who aren't afraid to give you feedback and aren't afraid to start working with you to see and explore, go into exploratory mode. And it's a very initial pre-market. It's almost like beta testing. You can do this with beta testing. It's the whole point of beta testing, because things go wrong with users that aren't paying much into the product, or it's definitely a minimal capacity or a very limited beta test, so that you can get the feedback you need to know what should you be doing so that your product is at the right state to release to the general public. And that's why I'd say it's not a matter of being too late or too early to release something. It is, what is the state of the product and how are you releasing it to the market? And how have you started? I'd say it's never too early to start, because if you find out a valuable piece of feedback that makes you want to change the direction of your product, then you should definitely, like I say, the earlier to start the better. Some people keep delaying and waiting and say no, it's not ready, no, it's not ready, and by the time they have anything that they actually release, then it's too late. Being too late is a much bigger problem than being too early, right? So I'd say start with the MVP. like I had the minimum viable product, I can start working on roles and companies with my product immediately. Zero barrier to entry. And that means I have a minimum viable product that I can start testing with a company to get feedback, and then I'll know really where I stand. Is it too far off that I have some things to think about before I start rolling this out to any company anywhere? Or am I at a good stage where it's like, yes, this is super valuable. Like, we're your first customer. Here we go. And then you can be like, this is working well. Keep getting feedback. Never stop getting feedback from customers, because regardless whether you're too early or you're right on time for where you are, remember, time's linear. It just keeps going. It doesn't care whether you're ready or not. So you need to be ready. It's about you being right on time with how you're going to market and how you're testing and all that stuff. So it's up to you. Don't think about waiting. Don't think, oh, I'm not ready because XYZ. Just start getting feedback at least. And if it's not with a product that's ready yet and it's not with your MVP, then you know you're too early because you don't have anything to release yet. So I think that's one of the big things to look at there.
Yeah, I love that. And from like a product developer, experienced designer perspective, being too early as well could be because of what you're designing, asking them to take or asking them to be too removed from what they are already familiar with and expecting of them, right? So if you create this really innovative new way of doing something, but it's too far removed from what people are familiar with, it's going to feel alien. And it's going to ask them to experience too much discomfort that isn't going to allow them to adopt it. You're going to force them to try adapting to it. So be aware of that. You might have a grand vision that is incredibly innovative and just, you know, like something from the future that no one's ever thought about. But in order for the timing to work out, you need to be aware that versioning is the way to go, so you can kind of hold their hand and slowly get them to again adopt these new innovations and new ways of doing things. So just be aware of that too. This is again goes back to customer discovery, customer research, experience design research, design research, all these things. So you understand what their expectations are, what they're currently familiar with, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and all those different layers of the human experience at the end of the day. So yeah, great stuff, Craig. Um, okay, so next question. Let's finish up. In an Excel, in excuse me, in an AI accelerated world where features get commoditized faster than ever, what modes do you believe are actually dispensable for a new SaaS or any business in 2025? You kind of touched on this already, Craig. But yeah, if you got any little extra tidbits, feel free.
Yeah, I mean the moat really depends on the product and the situation and the market. I'd say stay creative, and it's something that the more you understand your customer, the more you'll figure out what's important to them. Double down on what's important to your most valuable customer. And by valuable customer, I don't mean just the customer who's paying you the most, because a lot of times the customers who are paying your company the most, it might be one that has their own needs and don't really care about all the other companies you are facilitating and what their needs are. So look at your customer base and figure out what's most valuable to your most valuable customer base. Double down on that, and your moat lies somewhere in figuring out what that is. And you want to also look at, of course, how easy is it to replicate? How commoditized is it? I mean, things that are commoditized are devalued. Anything that becomes commoditized, like people expect it to be free. And it's not that it's not providing a ton of value. It's just that they're anchored onto the idea that they can get that problem solved or that product or that solution anywhere relatively cheap, that's the definition of commoditized essentially, is that it's easily accessible, the supply and the demand and the price for it. And it's just accessibility is just one angle on what commoditizes something. But I'd say research a little bit into what that means for your product. Again, another great use case for AI. If you look at different things that could be commoditized, or put your a little bit about your product into an LLM and say, what could make this commoditized over the next 3 years? And then think about, okay, are these answers legit? Are they or are they things I haven't thought about before? Maybe some of them are just like, well, that's not true, and you just disregard something. But it gives you some ideas to explore with. Um, AI itself is it has commoditized a lot of different things. So I'd say it's important to understand where it's moving in the future so that you don't hit your own roadblocks and you're actually building to become a more powerful service or product as different things like AI evolve. So when I built my AI engine, I made sure that uh, for the use case that it's doing, a better and even something that seems like it's competing with what I'm doing actually further empowers what I'm doing rather than commoditizes what I'm doing. So you can look at creative ways to do that. And it really is a creative process. Um, One of the reasons, and like I said before, I came from a creative entertainment industry into a business industry. I think one of the reasons a lot of the business ventures that I've been a part of were so successful is because I realized they're creative processes as much as they are technical processes. So keep that in mind as you're building out.
Right on. All right, two more we got from TQ Mid, who again I appreciate you being so bold, asking so many questions. This is great. I wish everyone was so brave to just lay it out there. Okay, so what's one contrarian belief you held during your journey that your board or advisors pushed back on, but ultimately proved critical to your success? So it's kind of a fun one. It goes back to a little bit of again finding that balance between blindly listening to advice or again being completely stubborn and ignoring everyone. So what do you got?
Uh, yeah, I would say I've never, and it goes back to like the being defensive kind of thing about certain feedback, but also the interaction goes the other way, right? Where sometimes you're giving feedback or taking feedback, or people put ideas out on the table. Um, Now for a story, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, um, which isn't necessarily, I mean, typically advisors that I've had have seen a lot of, um, we've had a lot of agreement on what's not a good direction to take something because we talk through it. We don't share things as a my idea. I'm trying to make my idea win kind of mentality. We share feedback and ideas in a, let's see if there's something here, and let's see if something is worth pursuing, or if it comes to the way we're pursuing something, see if it makes the most sense, and we share feedback. And I think it's really important for founders to become really good communicators in doing that, especially if you're looking for investors, because those types of conversations will happen a lot. And it's not about having an idea win, it's about talking and framing things in a way that creates understanding and clarity around what a company is actually trying to do. And as founders, talking about that amongst yourselves will help you also decide which investors best align with your company, because that's going to be super important. And also what advisors best align with your company. So it's really great to talk these types of things through. I'd say um, someone who I teamed up with that I met at one of Gary's 805 lunches. Blake Baxter, who I was hanging out with last night, and we talk about our businesses a lot. He's a great person, great mentor, great advisor to start bouncing ideas off, because he's a fellow co-founder who um, has a lot of unique experiences that I haven't had that are really cool. And then also at the same time, we share a lot in common. We both have come up through the entertainment industry. We've both founded companies, and um, sharing that type of feedback. It's never about, oh, this idea is good, or validate this. Well, sometimes it could be about validating idea, but we don't have our own biases that we automatically inject. We more talk about how to become more clear and how aligned certain things are that happen with our companies and things like that. And great questions come up. I'd say one of the big things is when somebody asks a question where your brain all of a sudden goes, okay, light bulb moment. Wait, that's interesting. I don't know the answer to that. That's something cool to think about. I think we had one of those last night while we were talking about each other's companies. And having that is awesome. So I'd say, I mean, there will become moments. I'll give an example because it's one of the first ones I could think of at Sync Sketch. When I came on as a consultant with them, one of the first things I saw is their pricing's not sustainable, and they're priced way lower than almost every other competitor out there. And I was like, there's no way. So I did a bunch of analytics, a bunch of forecasting, a bunch of modeling, was looking at different things, and it was a pretty significant price raise that I was offering. And I saw when I said like what they should be charging for their product, the CTO's face just kind of went like shock, like jaw dropping moment where it's like, do you think people would pay that much for this? And if they do, does that make us jerks? Like, what's the deal? So it's one of those things where when you present something like that, you'll want to bring facts to the table and data to the table, but also remember to go back to the values of your company and what it means. And it's one of those things where companies evolve and they go through transitions. Um, and those transitions can be delicate. Like you're involving your customer in the impact. So there's an external shell to it, and there's also an internal shell as well. And I think it's important because, and by shell, I mean ecosystem, essentially. There's an internal way of operating and sustaining your company, and that deals with your business model. The external is the product, the value, the strategy, the things that you're offering your customers. And one kind of dividing line that I think is there is that CAC, cost of acquiring customers, separates that internal and external view. And you want to constantly cross through that little CAC barrier, I'd say, by feedback from the customers. So the more tools you have internally to get feedback from that external customer, you're able to increase the value or get data on how to increase the value of your product. And that's one of those kind of cycles that I like to say. And that's why it's very easy for companies to forget to get customer feedback, because you have these people internal in the company and there is that CAC line there. Now I don't know if if anyone else kind of describes that kind of fine line on what's on each side of that. Your sales teams very, very used to working on the outside external layer of that. And then they bring things to the internal as well. So constantly tread that line and cross it and make sure there's communication going through that line as well. But uh, yeah.
Awesome. No, that's great. Okay, so we got one last question, and it's always like, a common great one to end with. So TQ Mid asks if you could only give one piece of advice to your younger self at the moment you started your first venture, what would it be?
Oh, wow. So I started my first tech company back in 2011, 2010, 2011, maybe. Um, and we got to the prototype stage, and we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't have these founder groups at the time. We weren't talking to, I mean, we had business advisors, we had a business consultant. We had people that were potentially interested in investing in the company, and things like that. But um, I think one of the things that created a lot of momentum is we had good ideas and we weren't afraid of failure. Um, but at the same time, we were focusing on a lot. We didn't get very far past the prototyping because we were focusing on all these different features and all these different things and all these different what ifs and what coulds, where because we didn't start with that simple MVP, minimum viable product kind of core, and working and digging into that really hard, we actually lost momentum. We felt like we were moving fast, but we weren't necessarily actually moving fast. We were moving fast in too many different directions rather than the same direction. So I think one thing to look at and advice I would give myself is focus on that MVP, and the quickest way to put something out there that somebody could start tinkering with, a customer could start tinkering with, a beta user could start tinkering with. I think that's really important because the more you try to chew, the harder it is to swallow, essentially. So I think it's important to not try to do everything at once and know that you can focus on one core thing and build off of it later on, but figure out what's most important, buckle down on it, and really try to move forward there. I think that's the biggest piece of advice for my first company that I would have given myself for sure.
I love it. Craig, you've been incredible, so generous with your time and just, yeah, elaborate, detailed, fantastic bits of advice and insights and feedback to everyone. So thank you so much for doing this. I'll see you Friday for our monthly lunch, which is,
Yeah,
coming up. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, thanks for, again, sharing, the love and support for, what I'm doing and the whole community. So thank you so much. Yeah. Do you want me to drop your LinkedIn to the chats if people want to connect with you?
yeah, connect, reach out. I'm always down. Love hearing about what people are doing with their companies. Yeah, I'm just I'm a social person. I don't bite, so come hit me up.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. So those are in the chats now. So yeah, again, thank you so much. And yeah, thanks, William, for joining us over on Start Mata. And yeah, anyone that's watching that is in the California area where we do these events, it's more focused on Southern California specifically. If you'd like to join us for future office hours using your microphone and camera to come up on stage, join us on Start Mata where we're running this. You can find it at 805stars.com, which will be rebranded soon. And yeah, there's a link in the chat for those too. So thank you so much, everyone. Craig, have a phenomenal rest of the day and week, and I'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for your wonderful questions.